Okay, moving on to the source reading then. I have attached copies of this on Show My Homework, so if you did wish to perhaps print these off and make notes yourself as you go, please feel free to do so, but no worries if not, okay? So when you are presented with both sources, it is of course important to take note of which one is source A and which one is source B, so you know that you're doing them in the right way around. Of course, this one is source A up here, and it's also interesting just to have a look at what's written in the box, because that kind of tells you a bit about the article itself. So you can see it says here, this is an article published in the Guardian newspaper in 2016. The writer, Stuart Heritage, explores how he feels now that his son is a year old. So one of the most interesting pieces of information there is the date, okay? So we can tell this is a 21st century piece of writing, okay? So we know that the other piece is going to be something from the 19th century. So I'm just going to read through it, and I'm going to make notes next to each paragraph like we've discussed, okay? So how could my son be a year old already? He's growing up fast, leaving milestones in his wake and tiny parts of me along with them. All right, I will pay attention to the format of the source as well. This tells me it's something to do with the newspaper based on the way it's got a headline, or it's an article of some form, right, and it has a picture as well. So, beginning from the top. My son turned 1 last week. The day marked the end of what has been both the longest and shortest year of my life. From the instant he was born, it's felt as if my son has always been part of the family. I don't mean that in an obnoxious, heart-eyed, this was always meant to be way. I simply mean that I haven't slept for a year and I don't really know how time works anymore. Whole years have passed in some of the afternoons I've spent with him lately. Entire galaxies have been born and thrived and withered and died in the time it's taken him to eat a mouthful of porridge. Okay, so I need to summarise what's just happened in that paragraph, and I'm going to say, writer explains how he feels with son. Okay, that kind of sums up how he feels about when he's with him. Moving on to paragraph 2. How is he 1 already? First he was born, and then I blinked, and now in his place is a little boy who can hardly walk and has teeth and knows how to switch off the television at precisely the most important moment of anything I ever tried to watch. It's not exactly the most unprecedented development in all of human history. Child gradually gets older, but it's the first time I've seen it close up. It's honestly quite hard to grasp. Okay, so here he's talking about how quickly his son is growing up. So here I'm going to put how quickly his son is growing. All right, and I can already notice that there's kind of a difference here between the first paragraph and the second. The first one has talked about how slowly time seems to move at times. However, his son is still growing up very quickly. Well, that's how the writer feels it is happening. Next paragraph then. A year ago, he was a sleepy ball of scrunched up flesh, but is now determinedly his own person. I can see everyone in him, me, my wife, my parents, yet he's already separate from all of us. He's giddy and silly. He's a show-off, albeit one who's irrationally terrified of my dad. He loves running up to people and waiting for them to twang his lips like a ruler on a table. When he gets tired and barks gibberish in the middle of the room, he throws his entire body into it like he's trying to shove the noise up a hill. So here we've got descriptions of the child. Descriptions of the son, okay? Next paragraph. With every tiny development, every new step he takes, every new tooth and sound and reaction that comes along to ambush us, we're confronted with a slightly different child. All right, so here I'm going to put differences in the son. Again, just picking out those key things, a short description. Next paragraph here. Photos of him taken in the summer seem like dispatches from a million years ago. Photos of him taken last week seem like a different boy. He's blasting ahead as far as he can. He's leaving milestone after milestone in his wake and tiny parts of me along with them. So again, we're still referring to how quickly the son is growing. Moving down to the next bit here. He'll never again be the tiny baby who nestled in the crook of my arm, sucking on my little finger in the middle of the night while his mum slept. Nor will he be the baby amazed by the taste and texture of solid food. Soon enough he'll stop being the baby who totters over and rests his head on my shoulder whenever he gets tired, or laughs uncontrollably whenever I say the word teeth, for reasons I don't think I'll ever work out. So here we're talking about things that the child is no longer going to do, all right? So we'll say events that won't happen again in relation to the boy and his growing up. Next paragraph. But I've had a year of this and it's okay. He's never going to stop changing and I don't want him to. This sadness, this constant sense of loss, of time slipping just beyond your grasp is turnover. An important part of this process. He won't realise this, of course. He's got years of unbroken progress ahead of him, where everything will always be new and he'll keep obliviously brushing away all of the silly old fools who tell him how much he's grown. So what he's saying here is that the sun won't pay attention to his growing as such, won't notice his growing up. That's much. That's for that paragraph there. Next bit here. One day it will creep up on him. Years of his life will pass in a moment and he won't be able to understand where they've gone. So here we're talking about time passing, and I can't help but want to make a link here about how this is essentially what the author is saying. That all this time is passing and he's not really noticed it. And the final line there, but it's okay, you can't hold time, you just have to make the most of what you have. And it's kind of just making a bit of a statement here, isn't he? A statement about life. So it's almost reflective towards the end here. Okay, so I'm going to pause there with source A, okay? So what I've done there is I've read through source A and I've made a note next to each paragraph about what's happening in that paragraph, so that when I'm asked any questions later on, I can be guided as to where to look for the answers, for evidence for the answers. What I'm going to get you to do now is I'm going to put source B on the screen. I have attached this on Show My Homework, so there are a couple of different choices for you. What I want you to do is to take source B and complete the same process, making notes next to the side of every paragraph about source B. Okay, you can either download the copy, print it off that I've attached on Show My Homework and make annotations that way. You can make notes on the screen if you have the facilities to do so, if you're able to type things next to the PDF copy, or if you want, you can either look at a copy of the extract, the version attached on Show My Homework, or I will put it on the screen here in sections, alright, so you can pause it. And perhaps if you have a bit of paper, write down paragraph 1 and then make a note of what's in paragraph 1, paragraph 2, make a note, etc, etc. Do that a few times over, okay? It's up to you which way you do it, but I will now put source B on the screen, alright? I'll do it in sections, so you'll have to pause it, have a look, play again and wait for it to switch to the next section, pause it, make notes, etc. Alright, but source B coming on the screen. So your task now is to go look at source B and complete the same process that I have just done for source B. So the first part of source B is on the screen, and I will move it down in a moment. So if you are somebody who is looking at it on the screen in the video here, pause the video now, read through that, make your notes, and then play again, and I'll move to the next bit. Okay, great. By now, hopefully you've managed to have a look at source B and make sure that you've made notes about each paragraph, regardless of which way you've done it, whether you've printed off the extract and made notes, whether you've made notes written down, whichever way you've chosen to do it. We are now going to move on to question 1, and this will be the last part of the lesson, okay? So, question 1. Read again the first part of source A from lines 1 to 17. So the important information there, we're referring to source A, and we need to look from lines 1 to 17. And we'll go back to look at the extract in a moment. Okay, so it says here, choose 4 statements below which are true. In the instructions there, shade the circles in the boxes of the ones that you think are true. Choose a maximum of 4 statements. Remember, there are 4 marks available. You can't just highlight all 8, and hope you'll get the 4 marks that way. You can only highlight 4. If you make an error, cross out the whole box. If you change your mind or require a statement that has been crossed out, then draw a circle around it. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look at the first 2 or 3 statements and decide whether or not they are true or false. I'm not going to answer the entirety of the question because that's partly what I want you to do, and this is where the quiz will come in handy towards the end, okay? But I'm essentially going to try and find at least 1 false and at least 1 true statements. But I am going to start at the top with the statements, okay? So the first statement there says, the writer's son has just had his 2nd birthday. Now this one's kind of easy to identify, because if I look back at the source, before I've even turned to lines 1 to 17, I can see it says at the top there, how can my son be a year old already? This makes me assume that the child has just turned 1. And if I look to the very, very first line of the opening, it says, my son turned 1 last week, which therefore tells me that that statement there is false. Okay, the writer's son has just had a 2nd birthday. No, he hasn't, because he's just turned 1. Okay, so I know I need to leave that one blank. That one is false. Looking At the next one then, it took a while for the writer to feel close to his son after he was born. So I now need to work out whether or not that statement is true or false. Statement B there. So I'm going to refer back to the writing here. So we've already looked at the split my son tone one last week. Yep, okay. The day marked the end of what has been both the longest and shortest year of my life. From the instant he was born, it's felt as if my son has always been a part of this family. And I'm going to stop there because that refers back to my statement there. It took a while for the writer to feel close to his son after he was born. The writer's just said that no, he feels like he was part of the family. So that tells me that that answer is also false. Therefore, I'm going to leave that one. All right, I'm not going to put anything in the boxes for the first two because I've discovered that those two are false. Moving on to statement C then. The writer has not slept very well over the past year. Going back to our source, remember we're only looking between lines 1 and 17, so we're just going to carry on making our way through. All right, so we ended there. So I'm now going to say, I don't mean that in an obnoxious, heart-eyed, this was always meant to be way. I simply mean that I haven't slept for a year and I don't really know how time works anymore. Key information there. The writer has not slept very well over the past year. From the instant he was born, I simply mean that I haven't slept for a year. So those two different statements, they match up. All right, it says in the article that he hasn't slept pretty much for a year, and here it says the writer has not slept very well over the last year. So if I was in the exam, I could identify that one as true. I would shade in the little box there. Okay. This is where I'm going to stop, all right? I've there modelled the process of identifying whether or not statements are true and false. Your job now is to identify which of the other statements are true or false using the source. All right, remember you're looking between lines 1 and 17, just in source A. Your task now is to identify which 3 other statements are true from this list. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set this task up as a quiz, which I will attach the link to on Show My Homework. It will take you through to Microsoft Forms, where you'll be required to log in using your school email address and password. And essentially, there'll be one question there, which is essentially just this question. All right, choose the 4 statements below which are true in relation to this source. And these 8 statements will appear on that quiz. Your task will be to tick the 4 that are true. Okay? That will be the next job. All right, if that doesn't quite work, it might be a quiz on Show My Homework, but either way there is going to be a quiz set up that you have to answer, all right, judging whether or not these ones are true or false. So that is your next task. Okay, go and do that now, decide which of the ones are true and go and do that quiz, and that will be it for today's lesson. Okay, have a good day and I'll see you for the next lesson tomorrow.